Stream check-in, we're good? Excellent. Oh, man, I hear me, which is never good. Welcome, and I'm really glad you're here today. I've been so excited to actually meet with your group and talk about it and share some ideas. I'm Jill from StudySync, and I've been with StudySync, which is a digital ELA program, 6 through 12. I've been with them somewhere between 6 to 7 years, training teachers all over the United States. And now I'm really happy that I start to train teachers all over the world. I was given this title. And what I always do whenever I'm given a title, I send it back to my tech team, especially if there's technology in the title. One, because I enjoy them kind of freaking out a little bit that I'm going to stand in front of a group of people and talk about technology. They take that moment to remind me, I know nothing about technology, and some of the things I'm talking about aren't actually technology. So I enjoy the fact that I will rattle their cage, but I also know they will be 100% honest with me. So I sent this to our tech team. They said, that is possibly the dumbest title I've ever heard for a presentation. Your tech team is that one friend in your friend group that will be honest with you no matter what. You've got the friend that you'll go to with your ideas because everything that you do is beautiful and fabulous and entertaining and wonderful idea. Go to that friend if you want that type of encouragement. Don't go to your tech team if you want honesty, because they will give it to you. So after they declared that to be the dumbest title they've ever heard, I said, well, what would be better? So we talked a little bit about what we were going to talk about in this breakout, which is how are you going to use technology in your classroom so that it benefits you? They said, well, can you call it that? I'm like, I don't know. This was the title I worked with. So what I wanted to do is really talk about, if we're going to have technology in the classroom, how is it enhancing that literature learning experience? How is that actually bringing literature more to life for your students? Not as a distraction, not as something that gets in the way, not as something that takes away what we want to share with them, which is great literature that we love reading, we love engaging with. So using tech in your classroom to inspire and engage. So that's where we settled. And then I was sitting here, I was like, we could do better, because what I really want is more than that. I'm called on a lot to go into classrooms to talk about technology. All over the United States, I travel, administrators will call me up, said, you need to come and talk to them. We've spent a lot of money on our technology. We spent, millions of dollars on our infrastructure, on our hardware. Teachers aren't using it. Come and help me understand why. We bought this great software. Teachers were on board for it. Now they're having trouble implementing it. Come in and help us to understand why. Every single situation gets better if I ask a lot of questions. I'm not there to solve their technology. My tech team is 100% right. I cannot solve their technology. I'm still from the school of unplug it and plug it back in. Did that fix it? Because that's my level of technology. I've got a list that my tech team will make me go through whenever I'm working with teachers that are having tech things, but none of it is actually solving a tech problem. When administration brings me in, I said, well, what questions have you asked your teachers? And I can tell a lot about an administrator right then and there. If they haven't, tells me a lot. If they've asked, why aren't you using it? Tells me a lot too. It's like, have you gone into the classroom to see what is going on? Have you asked them for the feedback? Like, what is it that you wanted technology to do for you? How can we help it to enhance that experience? And so that's really where I dig down to. One district in particular called me in. They said, they're not using, we've adopted StudySync. My teachers aren't using it. We've evidence to show that they're not using it. Come in here and tell them to use it. Make them use it. I said, absolutely, because teachers love it when I walk into a room and tell them what to do. Teachers all over the world dig that. So I said, well, how about if we do it a little bit different? Like, let's go in and just ask why. Like, why not? And so because I started into my prepared speech, and then I realized it wasn't connecting. So I said, let's talk about this. What are the issues? We filled a whiteboard full of what their issues were. I was like, okay, this is a problem. But for the first time, someone was asking questions like, why not? So then we start to look at this whiteboard full of problems. And I said, well, let's sort these now into 3 buckets. Let's identify which are hardware issues. Which are the infrastructure? Which are the broken Chrome cards so I can't push it down the hall? Like, that's a separate issue from some of the others. And what are software issues? What are you don't understand how to use the software enough to where it's going to make sense that you give up that kind of time. Like, what am I gaining for this? It's like, that's a separate problem. Then the other bucket was classroom management, because that is actually what kicked me in the teeth when I first brought technology into my own classroom. I taught math. I thought the kids would love it because all that they had engaged with math was gaming. So I was like, I'm going to be teacher of the year. I'm going to get them to do everything on math because we're going to make it a big old game. I was failed so many times by the technology not working that it ended up taking more time. I was like, I just don't have time for this. The other thing is because I'd be so anxious about utilizing every moment in my classroom that I would have them get their laptops, open them up, let it, because it takes a while for it to load. So I would do that. And then I would give the instructions of what we're going to do. It took me probably a good month and a half to realize how that was such a lousy way to start a class. I can't compete with a 12-year-old and an open laptop. I could put sparklers in my hair, paint myself purple, dance around. I can't compete with, they're changing their cursor. They're changing the background. Like, there's things happening in 12-year-old world that I can't compete with. So sadly, it did take me about 2 months. And so then I changed my approach. It's like, nobody open up your laptop. Now I'm going to give you instructions. And now you can let it, after I gave all my instructions, something so silly, but made a world of difference in them receiving the information and enjoying it. I was like, that is too simple. But I was such a rush to get technology going that I forgot to step back and realize, who am I dealing with here? I'm dealing with middle school. And I consider myself a pretty entertaining teacher, and I can't compete with a laptop that's open and a 12-year-old. And so then we started thinking about, okay, what is it that teachers need when we start to engage and talk about technology? So I'm going to take that lesson that I learned from administrators. When you hear that we're going to talk about technology in the classroom, what are some of the things that you need to get out of this session? Anything that you need out of this session. So it felt like that was a long walk down the hallway. I want to make sure it was worth it. Technology in the classroom, what do you want to know?
I'd like to sustain their attention span when it comes to both theory and practice.
Mm-hmm. What age group?
My age group would be 14 to 17, 11 and 12.
So high school age?
Yeah.
Yep. You're competing with a lot going on in that brain. Yes. Anything else? We talk about technology in the classroom. What else do you want to know?
Application.
Misuse of what?
Application. Was in my case, we use personal.
Misuse, 2 S's, 1 S. Misuse.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Their tablet, their devices. So I don't know what is installed over there. So in between, they open some games and they just play.
Right? Yes. So competing with that. Yes.
Personalization.
You saw my notes, didn't you? Nice. Anything else? Gamification, good or bad? I know. Is it good or bad? Technology in the classroom. If you come into a discussion and we say, we're going to talk about tech in the classroom. Pardon?
Collaboration. When they write the answers in the collaborative work.
Yes.
How to stop technology as a source of distraction in the classroom?
Distraction. We like good distraction. I can redirect, but if it's bad distraction, it's actually taken away. Bummer. So these are all the things that I started to learn when I go in. It's like, okay, where are you in your understanding? What is your expectation? Because I've learned over the years, and sometimes I'm still learning it, is not to barrel ahead with what my understanding is and what we're going to talk about in tech, and get a sense of what it is that you need, because you're not going to use technology if it's not going to help you with some of these, because it's just one more distraction. Another school that brought me in, because again, they spend a lot of money on technology, on the hardware, on the software, on the training, all of those things to then not have it perform or to their expectations. School district flew me in and wanted me to spend a day, solve all of our problems, and make sure that everything's okay. Said, here's the deal, because I've also learned this too. I can't come in and talk and fix any of your tech problems if one of your IT guys isn't with me. So I started bringing that into it. It's like, I need him just to spend a morning with me. I need her to just come and understand what it is from the teacher perspective that's going not quite right in the classroom. What can you help us with? And so from that, we started to get down to the nitty gritty of it. Like, is tech the problem? Is it the use of tech the problem? You know, what's actually happening there? This teacher was telling me that his StudySync lessons weren't going as planned because students would come in and their laptops would be dead. How many times have you dealt with laptops not being functioning, not being expected? Welcome. And so I sat in on his classroom. He's first period of the day. Students are coming in from home with a dead device. He's like, I can't count on using technology because the students don't actually have them loaded. I was like, that's not a software problem. That's something else. So I'm sitting in this classroom. I've got our tech person with us because he's trying to solve all this problem, thinking it's a much bigger problem. Are these bad batteries? Are these like, he's already off and running. And so I said, but you got to sit and watch. 9th grade English, they file in, teacher already has a plan how they're going to do it. Students walk in, Mr. Jones, my laptop's dead. So it's an old classroom. All of the outlet banks are around the perimeter of the classroom where there's a countertop. Students come in because got a dead laptop, can't do anything. They plug in so that they can actually start charging and they can participate. Here's the problem. Because I said, gotta love high schoolers. So I said, hang on just a minute. How many of you have phones? Every student in there raises their hand. It's like, show me your phone. How many of you have a low or dead battery? None of them. None of them. Every last one of them had an absolutely full battery. These kids didn't know not how to charge a thing. They were making a choice. His classroom was all assigned seating. They could sit with whoever they wanted when they were plugged in and sitting on the counter. So I was like, that's not a technology thing. These kids are fooling you because that's not about tech. They know how to charge something overnight. That's not the challenge. They're trying to manipulate you because they want to sit with their friends and they can't do that in assigned seatings with a charged thing. They can only do that if they're plugged in there. They're smart, they're cunning, and they will always outsmart us. We try to like get ahead of them, but they're pretty clever that way. So when I meet with schools, like, help me to understand what problem are you trying to solve? And that's what we came down with is this is really what we need to talk about with technology, not force feed it to the teachers to say you must do it because we've spent the money and the energy and we've trained you. But what problem are you going to use tech to solve in your classroom? And let's take it from that perspective. Since I'm work for a literature-based company, that's what we're going to take a look at is like, how can I use technology to engage and capture my students to get them to be more participating as we discover and read these amazing pieces of literature? The hardest StudySync was created because the founder asked that very specific question. Robert Romano, amazing guy. He's read probably everything on the planet. He's a history buff. He read. His own 2 children, who were, I think, middle school and high school at the time, were not readers, which, as we know as teachers, it breaks your heart if your own kids don't read. And so he first went in, it's like, well, why? He's like, well, they like being on their phone. So he's like, okay, we might have something here. Can we bring literature into something that you would actually engage with and talk with? And that is, I mean, he has a much more clever, colorful way to tell his origin story, but that's the gist of it. He wanted to actually engage his own children in literature. Our program, our entire company was started with the library. All the other enhancements, and I'll show you just a few of them today, to get kids engaged and get them to participate, all came from that, but the first came from having good literature be very accessible so students can actually read and engage with it. So we started with Using Tech in the Classroom, Enhanced Learning. Good title. Right when you walked in though, I changed the title to How to Enhance Teaching and Learning. So I think that actually gets more to it, is there are some things that we've built in here that we want to be a benefit to the teachers for how you're delivering and what you're delivering to your students. So we want to make sure that you've got that available to you. So when you're connecting with technology, we want you to know that everything we're building in there is that we want to support your traditional teaching and learning that we know is good, is good, is fabulous, but can we actually elevate that? Can we use some tech-based tactics to elevate that? And yes, there are some bare minimums that you should expect from software, from technology, the way things are now. We'll go through some of those. So this is just a few of them that we're going to hit. It's how do we use multimedia to actually hook students, to engage, to get them to participate and be curious about the literature that they're going to engage with. First of all, it has to be interesting literature. Second of all, we've got loads of ways that we can make it interesting and have them engage. Blast. How do we use that to actually encourage? It's one of the elements in our program. It's based on social media. So the kids already love it before we even start. It's current events. It gets them reading and writing and being able to share their ideas. Concept definition videos sprinkled throughout. It's the vegetables of a good meal, is that it's their balanced nutrition is helping them to understand and break down the concepts. I'm going to show you what one of those looks like. Peer review, blending print and digital. Even though we are digital forward, there's always a print because we know how valuable the blended learning. So everything that you need to be able to teach is all on digital, but we also know teachers know best when to pull kids off technology, when to actually slow down, let them engage with the text. And so we have a print version that goes with that. We also have student mobile app. This came directly from our students. You can download all of your assignments onto your phone and work offline. I have students that are very proud to show me their 300-word essay that they typed out with their thumbs. Terrifies me, but that's the world they live in. And then, sorry, I promised them I wouldn't hit that. And so it's able to then take their learning with them wherever they are, whether they're at football practice, whether they're on a bus ride home, wherever it is, to have them start engaging with their technology. We have that set up into the program. Questions before we go on? Excellent. So how do we use multimedia? So what we've taken is our texts that are in there. We use it to introduce the text. It's a movie trailer. And I'm going to show you an example of that. It's a, how do you start to lay the foundation? How do you start to build a curious, start to engage in that conversation? Some of the texts that we have in there are very complex. Students have a hard time with some of them, and we want them to. We want to work that muscle. We want to challenge them with interesting, complex text that requires them to think. And so to do that, we know that we have to start to really capitalize on building that background. We know that introducing the text is the best way to do that. And again, they are, I think at most, the movie trailer ones, 90 seconds long. We're very intentional about everything's in there. Sight, sound, how it actually, everything flows together is very intentional. So again, start them to be curious about what it is that they're going to read. There's a lot of layering into building background on just that 90-second video. We have a lot of guidance. This is, I copy and pasted this from like the lesson plans, just the section of it that, what did they notice in the video? Getting them talking about it. Before we even talk about what was the author's purpose? What do you think that means? It's like, what did you notice? How did that make you feel? So again, we want the kids to start to engage in literature, not compete with literature. The literature is like the heart of it, but how can we help them, elevate their understanding so they engage with it more and they're more active participants in their learning. Blasts, another great way. We have two styles of blasts. We have blasts that are in the curricular pathway that's meant to engage the students. This one is particularly talking about the genre. So this is our essential theme in this particular unit is what makes you, you. All of the texts are tied to that, the writing prompts, everything's kind of tied to that theme the genre being poetry. This gives them an introduction to it. All of our blasts, 140 character limit, you can open that to 280 or you can turn it into a full writing prompt. Our students love this because that's the world they live in. It's the length at the time, it was the length of a tweet. It was a length of being able to engage, and it was a quick, they did a informational text reading and then responded to it. So it was low risk to them. Like not a lot can go wrong in 140 characters. But what it ended up being, we don't tell them, is that that's your thesis statement practice again and again and again. There's no room for a lot of fluff and unnecessary, that it's very targeted and intentional. What we also now have is with the blast, we have this structured, controlled way to start to lay the foundation. This is our driving theme through that whole unit. This is the blast that's getting them to start to think about it. But again, with regular practice, they're synthesizing that information, because not only do you have that informational text at varying lexiles, depending on what your students need, there's also links to research links that extend that thinking, that expand that beyond. Having them to read that and then synthesize that, share the ideas with their kids, and then respond in this text, powerful stuff. And that's just the ones that's in the curricular pathway. On a regular basis, we're dropping in current events. Just yesterday, our team dropped the blast that was reflecting on, and we're very mindful of being sensitive to it, but reflecting on the horrific earthquake in Turkey. And then the focus of the blast, though, was how does community come together to help you when tragedy strikes? What does community? So it's taking a huge, horrible concept and then breaking it down to something that is accessible to the students. Let's start thinking about, you know, there's always something that we look at is Mr. Rogers. He said, always look for the helpers. Same idea. We wanted that to kind of be the focus. It's like, let's focus on something's huge and scary and horrible. Let's now try to look at something good. So it's amazing that they drop these in on a regular basis, weekly. We'll have new events. And then being able to share their idea on a digital platform. That again is their world. We're really wanting them to become news literate. We're wanting them to become news literate, online savvy when they share ideas, that there's appropriate rules of engagement that we want them to participate in. They need to practice that. Our age group is middle school to high school. They need to be able to practice that and understand that within these safe boundaries, what's acceptable interaction and exchange. Another way that we bring technology in is through peer review. We know how powerful that is. Research has backed it up, that giving timely response is a great way to engage your students and have them more active participants in their own writing. Because if they know not only their teacher is going to read it and provide feedback, their peers are going to read it and provide feedback. The anonymous element is because we want students to feel very confident that they can share their ideas authentically without it being, she's my best friend, I love her idea, so whatever she wrote is fabulous, don't change a thing. She was actually not nice to me in second grade. Everything she writes is garbage, and I'm going to tell her that. So it takes that personalized part of it out of it. It's never anonymous to the teachers because we're not fools. Again, we know our audience. We're dealing with, you know, middle school to high school. So it's never anonymous to you. You can always see what they're doing, but students have asked because teachers can actually turn it on or off, because there's a good argument. Sometimes teachers say, if you're going to put an opinion out there, you need to put your name to it. Then just as quickly as they do that, they backtrack and say the quality of the feedback dropped. And so they always like add it back in. But what it also helps to do is that we're practicing that analyzing, writing, revising. Analyze, write, revise. Analyze, write, revise, because we know how important that is to turning them into good, authentic, skilled writers and really using the critical thinking. It's like really being intentional and responsible for their thinking and developing it. This is rarely something you're born with. That is definitely a muscle that you need to flex and strengthen and really work on and understand, like, how can I intentionally make that better? This is a happy accident. Like our research also found that when they were more responsible for providing feedback, it changed the community of the classroom. Because it also is, not only am I learning and developing for myself, I have an active participating role in other learning. When I taught middle schoolers have this amazing conflict going on that they are very confident, overly confident, and incredibly insecure all at the same time. They would think that their writing is fabulous. There's absolutely nothing they could do to improve on it. It is practically perfect. And so glad that I spit that out on the first try. In StudySync, what we do is we take the writing side by side. You get to see yours and the one you're critiquing. And all of a sudden, it's like, I thought that was great. And now I'm actually looking at great. This one actually was more to the point and answered the question. That was a happy accident that started to really impact their writing as well. Is that there is more that can be done. There is a better response. There is, or nice to know that mine is pretty good. This one isn't as strong, but now I know why. Like I got to my point and I gave a very strong support to it. This one, I don't even know what the person's talking about. That's feedback I can give. Loved your enthusiasm, wasn't really sure of your point. Important things for them to understand. Really powerful to have that built into all of it. So then when we talk about how do you actually bring that literature to life? Because again, I don't want to compete with the literature. In our program, we have not only the digital aspect of it, we have reading guides for when the novel is in hand. We absolutely know how incredibly important it is to actually engage with the novels, building endurance, really taking something through to completion, taking that whole development is incredibly, incredibly important. So how can we use all of the aspects within the curriculum core path to really engage the students in a multiple of ways? So we'll use, and I'm going to show you a quick example too of like the sync TVs. This is always going to be peer-to-peer students explaining concepts, breaking down complex prompts, helping to analyze a text. And it's done in the student voice because we know how important it is to have that student representation, like you're understanding me. I have that same question. And so now I can actually see how they do it. What we've also found, another happy accident, we're modeling good collaborative discussions again and again and again and again. It's not that everything in those discussions is perfect. We actually show examples of if you disagree with somebody's idea, that's okay. But you can't just say, that was a dumb idea. It's like, I need to back that up. I need to back that up, or I need to be able to, it's not my opinion. We actually have to support it with text. You know, where it's like, I don't think that's what the point was. Back it up in the text. What did you see in the text that shows that? So we'll see disagreement within the discussions, because modeling that behavior of how can you disagree with somebody, but then also make your point that is supported in the text. How do you agree with somebody, but elevate the discussion? Yeah, I agree with, that was always such a cop-out. Everybody has to participate in the discussion. Well, I agree with her. That didn't extend our discussion. Nobody, like, that didn't actually elevate anything. So it's modeling also that behavior. You can agree with somebody, but now I need to elevate that. Like, why? Or how do I take it deeper? This is also what we consider to be the bare minimum of all of the text in our curriculum path. We have authentic voiceover actors doing the audio, because we know how important it is for students to hear and to see on the text and how they connect. But also for a lot of our English learners too, is how do I hear the text with the, you know, the intonation, with the inflection in the voice. We're able to use these amazing voiceover actors to be able to give some meaning, the author's purpose of the text. So it would have been much less of a hassle to just have computer, just word, 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 word. But that didn't actually bring another layer to the meaning. Everything within our program, we actually challenge is like, is that bringing literature to life? Is that actually enhancing the text? And so that's going to be a challenge through all of that. But then on a technology and any tech you use in your classroom, the very least the bar is really low in what you should expect of them as a bare minimum is how are you making this accessible to my students? In this day and age, there's no excuse for any of your technology that you're not challenging. Like, how are you addressing universal design for learning? Like, how are you making this more accessible? How are you making this something that my students can use and it meets their needs of where they are? So we're going to show you a little bit of that. How many of you are familiar with StudySync? You've seen it, heard of it? Oh, okay, this is crazy fun then. This was another thing we talked about in the beginning when I added how to enhance teaching and learning. We also wanted to figure out everything we put in there is either to serve elevating the literature and making literature become more engaging for your students, or how do we make teachers' lives easier? And if we don't answer those two things, if we're not serving those two stakeholders, then there's a big fight that happens internally in our company where we're challenging, like, what is the purpose of that? If you feel it is so important, how do we actually elevate that and make sure that it either is making the teachers' lives easier, making their teaching better, or how is it on the receiving end for the learners? Are we elevating their achievement of it and elevating their understanding? So easy things that sorry, tech guys, really hard things, but it's easy to expect of them is, we embed video to be able to make your lives easier, reading all of their writing. How can I actually shorten that feedback loop to give them meaningful feedback right away? This is a biggie. This was probably, there was many things I would redo in my teaching. Like, I knew I could have done better. There were ways I could have made every lesson better. The thing that kept me awake at night was that I didn't give meaningful feedback to my students in time before they repeated the mistake. That is the stuff that actually would rock my world and make it a challenge. Like, that is what was upsetting to me, that now I'm seeing them repeat that mistake, further strengthen that mistake because I didn't give them meaningful feedback in a timely manner to correct it. Anything that we use in the program is designed to actually make your lives easier and give you feedback faster. Things such as auto grading, auto scoring, like the reading quizzes, vocabulary quizzes, grammar, all of that is automated to give you that data right away. And then things like embedding video, a video function. So even though it's digital, you can very easily within the lesson be able to provide video. So in your review, Susan, this was a great start. Loved the energy that you started with it. In the second paragraph, I kind of lost, the thread of what you were doing. You came back in the third paragraph with some strong ideas. Way to go. Whatever it is, the idea that you can personalize it for each student right in their point of use where they're receiving that data, brilliant. This also allows teachers to front load. You can embed video on the beginning. So sorry you missed class today. Here's the assignment. Good luck. We expect you to be caught up, or whatever you want to do with it. But this was another happy accident that we found, and research has supported, that the more feedback on a consistent basis that we're able to give students, they start to internalize that. They start to internalize that coaching, and they start to hear you in their head, which is really powerful. And so the more that we can give them that corrective feedback, it actually gives another layer to them internalizing it and being able to apply it. This was another thing that occurred during pandemic. We were already up and running. We've been around for over 10 years. We have over 3 million users in the United States. We're just now bringing it to the global market. What this allowed us during pandemic was to keep that connection with teacher and student, where you can embed video right in their assignments. And so we found that relationship, that connection between teacher and student that was negatively impacted during the pandemic. We found another way that we can help teachers stay that connected, that voice is in their head, that your coaching and your support is still something that you could do. It was so wildly popular that we kept it in. We're not going to take that out. That has to stay in now. Cool stuff. I'm excited for you guys to see that one. And then accessibility. When we talk about, how do we actually make this personalized? There is so much in customizing within the StudySync that you can actually target you can customize all the prompts. You can customize aspects of it. One student group needs this level of prompt. This is actually too ambitious for that group. I'd be happy if they covered this and this. I can change my prompt and just shoot it out to those students because it's all within the program. They make it very, very easy to be able to do a grouping and be able to put it in there. I'm going to show you real quick too on the scaffolds. So incredibly powerful to be able to have automated scaffolds right there at point of use. Brilliant. Progress monitoring. Everybody's got data. There is no way you don't have data. Data is everywhere. But how do I use that data to influence? Like, how does that help? We sync to teacher lessons. Like, we've identified of the bar that you set for your student, what would be, they understand the skill lesson. For anybody who's below that bar, we've done the search in the library, because if we can save you that time, and we'll suggest, here's a follow-up lesson. Here's a reteaching opportunity for those students that didn't get it. Any place that we can save you time, we wanted to do that. Everything, like the beginning when the standards, and because everything is standard aligned too, we've sprinkled throughout like confetti. Standards are everywhere, and we'll label it because we never want you, is this really going to cover RL 8.4? And so we'll have that throughout. Student voice and representation, incredibly important to us. And we make sure that in the scaffolds that the students feel like they're heard and they're seen. These are very straightforward. You understand a lot of these. Anything that you don't, let us know. Those are built into every one of our lessons and experiences too, because we know how important it is for students. I believe they will make this slide deck available to you. So you're welcome to have any of this to follow up questions. So before I go live, I want to make sure I keep asking my good questions. Is there anything that you haven't seen yet? I know some of the things up on your question here we're going to go to right now as we go live. I want to check my time because I did not set my timer, which is okay. So this is live right now into StudySync. I happen to be, to make it easier, I went to 8th grade, unit something, I forget which one. Oh, unit 2, 8th grade. I want to show you a few of the things that we talked about of distraction. When you have it just there is, I mean, students, was one thing is you could say, I pace, I am always around. And my students know that because there's no sense in cheating or not being on task, because I will always come and stand behind the person who doesn't have it pulled up. I'm picking on you. So that is something that I did too. It was always one of those like, do your students cheat in your classroom? I said, of course they do. Love that question. Of course they do. I actually started my class, I taught algebra to middle schoolers. I would first show them, here are all the cheating sites I know you can go to. Plug in the algebraic formula or the question and it'll actually solve it to you. The sites got so incredibly good. So I would show them, here are all the ones I know. And by the time the semester's over, there's going to be new ones. You know, let me know. But I'd also explain behind that going, that will get you through your homework. It really will. Having the problem already laid out for you. It won't help you to understand the problem. It won't help you to solve it. And it won't help you on the assessment. So I get that sometimes you need the shortcut, but let's understand that it's only going to get you so far. Did that solve all of the cheating in my class? No. Middle schoolers, can I guilt them into not openly cheating? A little bit. So we use that to the best of the advantage. Same with like StudySync, like there should only be one tab open. I've got two because I've got my slide deck on the other one. And so we help to kind of narrow the focus. This is just the teacher view. I can show you later if you're interested what the student view looks like. But this particular one is the poetry. You know, we gather our units, they're organized by theme and by genre, because we want to use these exemplar texts to be able to teach the reading, writing skills. And so we'll use, in this particular one, we're going to use this poem to actually help to reinforce the lesson on visualization. So let's pop into the lesson. This again is the teacher preview of it. It's letting me know I was quiet for a while. And this is just a short sample of what it is for our students.
In reaches for the baton.
When you visualize, you create images in your mind.
Based off the writer's descriptions in the text.
It's sort of like imagining the story.
Like watching a movie in your head.
Students are frantically writing notes because they're following along. We pause for that. One thing you'll also notice with StudySync videos, it's always going to be student to student.
Is hands down the best way to get caught up in a story.
And if you're really into a story, it's easier to understand and remember information.
So, visualizing is kind of like a studying.
Do you want to know my favorite way to visualize?
What?
Paying attention to sensory details.
Sensory details? Like your senses?
Yep, they're details that appeal to your sense of sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste.
So that's how we cover like they are, I don't think ever longer than 5 to 7 minutes. Like the really, really big ones will be like 10 minutes. The idea being from student to student, these are all things you're already teaching. You're already showing them and telling them and talking them through. To have peers reinforce what it is you're saying absolutely has it. We have closed captioning on all our videos for students that would benefit from actually seeing that. You also have the ability to print and share the transcript for students that would benefit of following along that way. Now, rest of lesson. We're going to go to the text. I thought I knew this poem. I take a look at this poem, and again, everything that's in the instructional pathway is also in their print. If you look at this poem, that's it. That seems 8th grade, like a short on-ramp to understanding poetry. Like that's a great one. Read it real quick to yourself. Yes. But take a look at that. Again, I thought I understood the poem. Now let's go back to the intro.
Amherst, Massachusetts, 19th century. From inside her home, poet Emily Dickinson looks out the window. She sees the tops of maple trees. She watches the first snow of winter fall onto their branches. She looks back down at the paper and pen on her desk, and she wonders. She knows what it is like to be a person with a name, an address, a family. But what would it be like to be no one at all? What would it be like to be nobody? And would anyone want to be nobody with her? Discover her sincere yet playful poem. Read I'm Nobody, Who Are You? By Emily Dickinson.
So already I think I have now a better understanding about what that poem is about. Again, I thought I knew it. I already read it. I thought I understood where we're going here. Now,
I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us who tell, advertise. You know how dreary to be somebody, how public and a fraud. To tell one's name, the livelong June, to an admiring Bob.
so without doing any additional, I think I have another layer to it. I think I now understand it because that's not how it sounded in my head. And I'm an 8th grader. I spent too much time being really excited about frog and bog. Because again, we know our audience, we know what we're doing with here. I got so excited to listen to it. I didn't even show you that you can actually highlight, and it highlights it in phrasing. It's not a word, it's in phrasing to, again, help the students to understand, to be able to process and think about the author's purpose and taking it deeper. But then we talk about the scaffolds that we can bring in there. This you can assign a proficiency level And for your students, there's a whole nother layer to it. So not only do you have the word bank and visualization, for your students that would need help connecting to this, we have text synopsis. It's like it's taking it to a whole nother level at a student point of use to help deepen their understanding of that very short, seemed very accessible poem, but it's now taken it many layers deep. Then when we ask them to participate on the text-dependent questions, we've got word banks, we've got scaffolds of, how do you actually make this more accessible to your students? We've got graphic organizers that are interactive, that are at point of use as well. So wherever we think it would help the students enrich in their understanding of that piece of literature, so now they can more actively participate, is something that we're really, really, really keen on. And so those are the type of things that are just easy to drop into to help with the personalization. Because if technology is not helping you to make learning more meaningful and enriched for your students, and it's more of a distraction. So gamification, you're not going to find in StudySync. Because if it distracts from that learning, in math, loved it, because they needed that repetition of practice of skill. And if I could help them to have that kind of repetition and make it more fun, all over it. We struggle with this because we don't want that type of activity participation be a distraction or draw away from. So once we figured out how to solve that one, you might see some in there, but it's not really in there now, because everything is about how do we make that literature come to life for that student so they have more of a connection to it and that they can actually participate more in those collaborative conversations before they start writing on it. How do we help that technology to make their writing more meaningful and to have more? Any other time we can also talk about built-in assessments. How do you have all of these things that are in there that actually help you learn and to be able to make sure you're checking for understanding? We've got all of that. All of it is standard aligned. All of it is digital. All of it is all those aspects of it, but I'm not allowed to talk about all of those. But this is kind of the gist of what you'll see from your point of view, that we've got our thematic units, we've got the novel studies, we've got all those kind of fun stuff about it. So at any point that you want more, reach out to us. We'll connect you with your McGraw Hill rep that will help you to understand, to take a look at it. It's like, is this good for my classroom? Will this actually help to engage my students more with literature? Will it help me to personalize and take, again, not wanting to replace the art of what teachers do in the classroom is not replaceable. But if we can actually help you to deliver the type of learning experience in a way that makes sense for you and your classroom, that's what we're interested in. Questions that you may have still. Because I know I'm trying to pay attention to be sensitive to time.
The hardest poem,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very easy now.
You like that? I thought I knew it. I thought I understood it, because I really didn't think it was that complicated on the surface. Mostly I traveled with these all the way from California, so when I want to make sure I get rid of them and I don't bring them back home. Any other questions of something else that you wanted to know that you didn't see that you expected to see? So the question about benchmarking, yes. We've got benchmarks in our assessment, 3 at every grade level, because we want something at the beginning of the year. What gaps do I have? Then we want something middle of the year. How are we progressing? Something at the end of the year. So we do have grade level benchmarks in that form. What's even better, because again, we could drown you in data. Gathering data was never my problem in the classroom. Helping to understand, like, now what does this data mean? How is this actually, how can I use it? So that's where, through a lot of the color coding, like in the grade book and stuff, and it will be hyperlinked to your student scored at 30%. Here's a recommended lesson to follow up on. So using that benchmark, and again, I can analyze and I can, technology, if you're using an assessment and it's not helping you to break down and analyze the data, find a different assessment. Because again, assessing the kids and getting data has never been the problem. Now it's like, what do I do with that information? How do I actually use that to help further the learning in my classroom? So yes. So much so that we've got an entire tab. Because then the next question, once I tell you that we've got amazing assessments that are digital, and yes, you can print these out too, understanding that meeting your students where they are, sometimes digital is going to work. We also give you access to creating your own. Every question, every passage that we have, you can break it down, but we also give you that you can add. Like if you've got your own passage that you know is something meaningful and impactful to understand, we wanted to make your lives easier by all of these units. That's where you'll have the standard aligned pacing guide, all of that to help lessons and the skill lessons and grammar lessons to help further that learning. But then we also know how important it is to have that flexibility. There's a unit creator built right into the platform. You can use, again, any digital asset that we have. I think there's over like 3,000 in the library. You can use any of those to design your own unit and be able to share it with your students and be able to pass that along. You can also add to the library. I have a teacher that loved the Robert Frost poem. It was missing the one Robert Frost poem that he loved teaching every year. Found it on the internet, copy and paste, dropped it in, digital asset. Now he can share it with his students. They now can actually, they can annotate directly onto it. All of those things of the digital assets that were there, we can have you do that. One teacher, heartbroken, 10th grade, 1 year, complete revolt, refused to read Frankenstein. First time in like her 25 years that she had a class that said, nope, not doing it for us. We're not reading Frankenstein. Broke her heart. And so we found all 7 hours of Frankenstein audiobook, downloaded it, made it a digital asset in her library so she can actually send it out to her students. If you want tips on how to manipulate the internet to be able to get you resources, I'm your gal. Because I heard it somewhere along the way. I've repeated it enough that I now believe it to be a truth, is that copyright rules are different for educators because you're using it to educate. You're not using it for profit. If you turn around and sell it on teacher, pay teacher, then that's a whole nother thing, and that is a violation. But if it's for educational purposes, and again, I've repeated it enough that I believe it to be a truth now. So if you know something different, please let me know. But I know I'm past time, and I appreciate your patience, and I want to make sure that we get to sustaining attention. I was a very entertaining read aloud, an amazing read aloud. That was one of my superpowers. I read aloud to my students all the time. I taught middle school math, still read aloud to my students. I am incredibly proud of the fact that my reading of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde made 2 students fall out of their chair. Granted, they are middle school, so I can't really say that that's a hard thing to do because they're always tilting in their chairs and they always scoot back and they fall. But I feel very proud of, they were so gripped. And so I was like, this is amazing. I am brilliant. I'm quitting teaching. I'm now going to be an audio voiceover. I then read Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer. Horrible, painful. It was awful. It was awful for me. It was awful for my students. I am apologizing to Mark Twain because I was like, I have ruined Tom Sawyer for an entire generation. That is a really hard read aloud. It was not what I wanted my students to experience from that. Went to the library, found a great audio reading, had to go through a few. Some were not very good because I wanted that experience. That's what we use with our voiceover read aloud, is that we want it to be an enhancement to the literature, not a distraction. We don't want students to look at that text that that's too complex, I don't understand it, and then bail out of it. We want it to be something that's accessible, that enriches their lives, because we know how powerful good literature is. And we want to make sure that that is something that they're excited about and that it feels approachable to them, especially if I have learning. If English is not my first language, hearing it again and again and again with how it was intended, have it be at student point of view. So they can pause it, they can reflect, they can start it over. Like all of that is within their control because we know how important that is to furthering their learning and helping them to be engaged with the literature. Questions before I let you go because I kept you over. Excellent. So in the back of the room are our McGraw Hill and local resident. They're going to wave. See, they're riveting and paying attention to everything I'm saying. They can help you. If there's anything that's like, you know what? Jill's right. I want to learn more about StudySync. They can help you understand that. We want to give teachers access to a demo. It's like, take a look at it, kick the tires, because you need to understand it to see if it's going to benefit you in the classroom. They can help you with that. They can help set all of that up so that we want to make sure that it's something that, like, okay, I can see how this can work in my classroom. I can see how I can use this. And again, we're not saying it's all digital all the time. We know how important it is to take them off of technology sometime. Blended learning is the cornerstone. Using both online and offline to deepen their understanding, to make that good literature really come to life and be more meaningful. Every place that we can, we build that in. And then if that's not enough, every resource that we have available to you or have available, we put it right at teacher point of use. That we have an entire help center that's teacher resources on blended learning. How do you use StudySync in a station rotation? Like, what are some ideas? Teaching lab videos. What does this look like in the classroom? Like, how would I actually get through that really comprehensive, overloaded with idea lesson plans that we have built in there? It's like, there's too much. And they said it's 40 minutes, but there's no way. I just did the math in my head and that's 3 days. So, what, how is that actually designed to be delivered? All of those things we put in there. We give teachers way too much because we want to put the choice in their hands, not to overwhelm you to think, like, I'm not doing it right because I didn't get through 3 days worth in 40 minutes. We want you to feel confident that it's a buffet, pick and choose. This text is actually going to knock my kids off their feet. I need to front load it with making meaning, meaningful interaction, all of those things, building the background. This text, well within the wheelhouse. Nothing in that vocabulary is going to surprise them. They can use context clues to be able to. So all of that is intended to give you agency so you feel confident that I can pick and choose and design whatever experience I want my students to have. I think this is the 4th time I said I was wrapping up. So now I'm really going to, because I don't want to abuse you for being so incredibly wonderful. So if you have any questions, again, McGraw Hill people at the back can help you with that. Thank you for spending part of your day, because I know how hard it is to get out of the classroom. And thank you. Thank you. And did I miss anybody with their nifty little decals?
Get rid of them.
So, the PPT is going to be sent or email?
Yes, I think Minerva will make that available. Yes.
The ones that the hacks for the net.